yourself now, parents. You can record. Okay. Zog the Mishna, yeah? So this Mishna we had before also. Echad bar harabim. Yeah, on the bottom of Chaf Bais Amud Bais. Right, so Echad bar harabim, ube'er harabim, ube'er hayochid. So we said that there's two different types. There's a bear and a bar. A bar is just water that accumulated in a hole. A be'er is live water. So echad bar harabim, be'er harabim, ube'er hayochid, oisan lapasan. So then you're allowed to do this shtick with the lechis on the corners. Right? Aval labar yochid, but if it's just an accumulated water that belongs to a yochid, then oisan lemechitza gavoya yutfachim. Then you have to make a proper mechitza. Right? Yeah, that's divrei Rebbe Akiva. Yeah. The reason, so why is he more machmer for a Rosh Hashanah? Right? Because if it's public and the water dries up, people are going to remind each other. But if it's a private guy's, and it dries up, he's going to end up using it, even though he's no longer allowed to use it because you're only allowed to use it for water, right? A be'er for a yachid is not an issue because that's fresh water that doesn't dry up. Right? So that's what Rebbe Akiva says that would need a mechitza. Rebbe Yehuda ben Bava Omer, Amos and pasken ela be'er rabim bilvad. He's much more strict. He says you're not allowed to make these pasken, these boards only for a be'er for a rabim. Right? It has to have both, that it won't dry up and it has to have the public. And for the others, you have to make it as a chagura. Now it's interesting that it says chagura literally means a belt, right? You make it as a belt of 10 tvachim, right? So that's it's interesting that he says. Why does he call it a chagura? Anybody? Rashi says, Tosfos says chagura pirush mechitza, right? So the terms change. And Rebbe Akiva says mechitza, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava calls it a chagura. I didn't see any pshat exactly why it changes that term.
Between what and what?
Between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava.
Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava prohibits use of boards for water holes, both public and private, as well as for private wells.
I understand, but he's not answering. What do you say, Rabbi?
I said a gartel is a mechitza. A belt is a mechitza.
Oh, I hear. That's what he's trying to teach you.
Maybe.
I hear. Okay, so Zog the Gemara. On to Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. So Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Halach Rav Yehuda ben Bava. So he says halach is like Rav Yehuda ben Bava, where that the only one that you can put these special lechis, these L-shaped lechis, is for a bear, right? Fresh water in the public. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Lo yhutru pasek b'rois elo leber mayim chayim bilvad. Which seems to be the same thing, right? Rabbi Yosef is saying that we only allow it for a be'er mayim chayim, right? A be'er that has fresh water coming in. The tzricha. So why do you need both of these? Both of these seem to be saying the same thing. If you said Allah was like Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, how about the rabbim? That's only by the public. And even if it's just gathered water and not fresh water, so then why would you say be'er rabbim if even a non-be'er works? All you're saying it for is to exclude Rebbe Akiva. So that's why Rebbe Yosef, in the name of Rebbe Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, is saying that we don't allow pasuk only for ber mayim chayim, and that's it. And if it would just teach us that the halacha is that it has to be a be'er of fresh water, then it doesn't make a difference whether it belongs to the public or it's a private bar. The Allah is like Yehuda ben Bava, that only a freshwater thing for the public. That's it.
How is this different than the Gemara that we had earlier?
What did you say?
How is this different than the Gemara we had earlier on that Chaf Aleph or Beis?
Chaf Aleph and Beis?
Yeah, Chaf Aleph and Beis. Do we have the same idea?
It said what? It's very hard to hear you.
I'm sorry. Better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not so much better, but yeah.
Sorry. The Gemara, it's both a reception, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
Talking about the differences between people that were olarregel and people and animals and making these I guess the pizzas around wells. Right? So talking about the difference of different types of water that you were allowed to do this with.
Right.
You know?
This doesn't fit in with that Gemara?
No, I'm saying, how is this different?
You mean, why is this Gemara any different?
Yeah. What's this Gemara telling me that I didn't know from the other one?
Because before you're saying we said the same thing, that it might dry up. And I think you're right. I think it's not saying anything there. Now it's just saying how we pasken, that's all. I think now it's just saying how we pasken. Right? Back then it was part of the conversation, part of the Gemara. Here I think it's actually telling us how we pasken. So we have two Amiroim who seem to be saying the same psak. So now we're trying to figure out what the Chiddush is. The question's better than the answer.
All right. So there it's kind of referencing this Mishna and this Gemara, which is where it's really decided.
Yeah.
Okay.
The question is better than the answer. Put it that way. Yeah. Anyways, okay. So Zok the Mishnah. Yeah. V'oid Amar Rav Yehuda ben Bava. Now it's going to come up in the Gemara. What is v'oid Amar Rav Yehuda ben Bava? Right. I mean, he says it. Well, he was the last opinion in the last Mishnah too, but they're seemingly unrelated. So what's v'oid Amar Rav Yehuda ben Bava? Hagina karfef shein shivim av v'shirayim al shivim av v'shirayim humokefes gada gavaya asar tvachim etavim l'basaycha. If you have a garden or a karfef, right? We discussed karfef the last couple of days. So a karfef is a big empty field that is not really used for anything, right? So if it's 70 Amos and change, by 70 Amos and change, but it has a fence around it, right? Of 10 tvachim high, then you're allowed to carry in it. It's got to have one of three options. It has to have like some sort of hut in it, or a house in it, or it should be close to the city, right? Then you would be allowed to carry in this place that's the size of 70 Amos and change by 70 Amos and change. That's the first sheet. Rav Yehuda afilu ein ba ela bar even if there's only a bar or a square bar or a cave in it, then you're allowed to carry in it too, because that would make it some sort of livable. Even if it doesn't have any of this, as long as it has 70 by 70, then you don't need anything in it. So again, there's three opinions here. One is that it has to have some form of human function in this big empty field. That's Rav Yehuda ben Bava's shita. The second shita is at Rabbi Yehuda, it's got to have a bar or some sort of hole or something like that. And Rabbi Akiva says it doesn't need anything as long as it's no bigger than 70 Amos or 70 Amos. Fine. R Eliezer he has a very interesting requirement. He said it has to be perfectly square. If it's even 1 amma longer than wide or wider than long, then it's no good. Then you can't carry it. Even if it's twice the length, then you're allowed to carry in it, but not more than twice the length, right? Meaning it would be 100 one way, and 50 wide, and 100 long, right? Fine. And then Amar Rabbi Ilai, Shamati mi Rabbi Eliezer, afilu hi kebeis kur, even if it's the size of a base core, right? It's still allowed. Now, a base core is a whole lot bigger than Bais Sasaim. Right? I'm sorry. The Anshe Chotzer get together and one of them forgot to make an Eruv. Like we discussed, when you're making an Eruv, what it means by Eruv is that if you have a bunch of houses in a yard, each person has to donate some bread and they leave it in one person's house. But let's say one guy forgot. So Anshe Chotzer Shogach Echon Eruv Eruv. He's not allowed to carry in and out of his house to the yard because he didn't participate in the Eruv.
They're doing this every week? Every week they have to do this?
If the bread lasts, then you don't have to do it every week. But if the bread gets eaten up, then you have to do it every week.
So the bread gets eaten up and everybody contributes except for one guy forgot to?
Yes, then he'd be out. You
can be
Why is this the first time we're mentioning?
You can be Zochman. Yeah, that's true. Not on Shabbos. What are you saying, Naftali?
Why is this the first time we're mentioning this type of Eruv, which is actually the real Eruv? And this other stuff is not really a real Eruv.
You're right. We mentioned it. We mentioned it parenthetically before, but this is the
No, I
first
know,
place that
but
it
in the
says.
Gemara, this
You're
is the
right.
first time it's actually mentioned when it's really that's the real Eruv.
Correct,
The
and
other
it's
stuff
also
we
seems.
do is-
Aren't you happy you didn't show up most of the 10 first nights? You didn't miss much.
What are you talking about? Ridiculous.
Great.
Well, also, I'm not so sure the Mishnah and the Gemara. I'm not so sure
Right.
the Mishnah and Gemara realizes that we don't use those other type of Eruvs,
What do you mean?
right? Meaning, this is the type of Eruv that we use, but
Yes,
the other
that's
type
true.
of
But
Eruvs,
we need both. We didn't really. We need the fences, and we also need this matzah thing.
No,
I'm
back
telling
in
you,
the day back in the day they just shared food. No,
Well, but they had to make sure that the yard had a fence.
it was a
The
chutzner.
assumption was that the yards had a chutzner, right? But I'm saying that it had to have a proper fence.
Ah.
But you're right. It also seems not to be the place in this Mishnah, right? What is it doing here in this Mishnah? Here we're talking about karfef. All of a sudden, it starts talking about putting the bread, right?
Does this mess it up for everybody else?
What do you mean?
Meaning, if he's in the middle and he doesn't partake, does it...
No, they're all allowed to. Avalahem mutter. For them, it's mutter. It's only he's got the issue. Since they all, right? They're even allowed to carry in and out of his house. He's just not allowed.
Okay.
There's a way around it. There's going to be a Mishnah later in the Masechta that there's a workaround in order to allow him to do it. But
You use a matzah for Eruv, so it stays.
right, yeah, we use the matzah for the Eruv, and then
I understand, but then when the matzah, I'm just saying, I don't know, after a year or 2 years, the matzah came up.
No, the
so
minig,
everybody
right, so the
contributed
minig
because
is-
this guy wasn't around.
it's true. The minig is that so the way we do it nowadays is one person takes it, the rabbi takes it, and this is what rabbis do for Erev Tafshilin also. The rabbi takes a box of matzah because there's a maximum amount. I think it's 18 groigers is the max, and that's all you need. You don't need to have an individual piece for each one. So basically, the rabbi takes it, gives it to somebody else, right? And that person is kinda a little portion of the matzah for the entire town. Now the entire town owns a little piece of this box of matzah, and then he gives it to the rabbi on behalf. So it's if the whole town does it. That's why you've never been asked if you want to participate in the matzah. We do this matzah. It's in the Aguda, believe it or not. So if you want to mess the whole town up, your kanoi, find where it is and go eat it. And then let everybody know right before Shabbos that you ate up the whole box of matzah. And then you can really cause problems.
Searching for the afikomen on a different level.
Let's wait
Correct.
till after Elul. Let's wait till after Elul.
I would say it'd be a good idea to wait after Elul, yes, to do that, if you want to do that. But it was interesting because this past Shabbos in the country, it was the last Shabbos in the country, and I saw the box of matzah sitting in the shul, and I was thinking for Shalosh Shulis, I should have given it out. It's a mitzvah, right? It's mitzvah matzah, and nobody's gonna use it next year. It just sits there a whole year.
It's like
Anyway,
But how do you need a Shalosh? Someone's carrying.
no, once it's there at the beginning of Shabbos, then you're okay. Okay, we'll see. You're right, Naftali. This is much later in the Masechta is going to discuss this.
it's like it's like the Erev Tafshilin that the Rav of the community does. He hides.
Yeah, exactly,
it,
right. Exactly. It's exactly that. Yeah.
In fact, you don't need it once.
But the Erev Tashilin, everybody gets all busy making sure that they eat it, right? That they
No,
eat
but
it.
the one that you could rely on in case you forgot.
No, I
somebody
know that,
should
but I'm
find that
saying,
one.
but for that, everybody's makbet to eat the Erev Tashilin because it was a mitzvah, so we make sure to eat. I can't even tell you how many questions I get about Erev Tashilin on a Sunday, Monday after Yom Tov. I forgot to eat the Erev Tashilin. Am I okay? Like, I don't know exactly what you want me to answer you. Like, well, you're not okay? You Machal Shabbos? But whatever. Anyways. V'chein shamati mimeno sheyotzin ba. What? Parrots, yeah. Yeah, okay. V'chein shamati mimeno sheyotzin ba ar kavlin. This is also not related. I also heard from him, sheyotzin ba ar kavlin b'Pesach. See, I mean, the reason he basically once this is Rabbi Ilai saying things over from Rabbi Eliezer. So therefore, once he said the first thing that had to do with our Mishnah, so then he said over the same thing about the Chatzar, and then he said over another thing, that you could be Yaitza with these Arkavlin is how do you call it? Rashi calls it it's a type of moror. And I asked all those Talmidim, if anybody else heard this from him, that you can be Yaitza with our Kravlin for Moron, and nobody heard about this, right? But actually, I'm sorry. Rashi says he went for all three things that he heard from Rabbi Eliezer. He went around to ask, did anybody else hear these things? And nobody else heard them. So I don't know if did he mean there that it's not so clear that he could rely on that, since maybe he's the only one that heard it. I'm not sure if that was his intention. Yeah, now Simon's not on, right? He picked. Okay, I was going to pick on him tonight again. Okay, because Tosfos, right? So where does 70 Amos and change come from? From the Mishkan, right? Because the Mishkan, the karfef, where does it come from? So it's if you chop up, we're going to see on Amud Beis, if you chop up, right, the Mishkan was 50 by 100, right? So if you cut that up, that makes 70 and change, set by 70 and change. So the third Tosfos down says, well, why don't we learn it out from the Harabais Esens Nashim, right? Shahayakuf Lamed Hey Amma ve'Esens Yisrael Hayakuf Pei Zayin. Meaning, if we're learning it out from Mishkan, from having to do with Bais Hamikdash, so who says you should learn it out from the measurement of the Mishkan? Maybe do it for the Harabais or Esens Nashim. So that's what
Because you learn from the Mishkan. That was the first time.
That's right. So that's Tosfos' first teretz, right? The call me the Shabbos and Mishkan Gamrina Lu, not from the Bais Hamikdash. Very good, Rabbanan, right? But then the second teretz, so Hazaris Chashivim Mukafan Ladira, and the Hazaras were considered surrounded for living. Shayu Shaimrim Bakalayla, because the Kahanim slept there a whole night. So the second shot, I don't understand what's going on with the second shot. That means sounds like the second shot should learn it out of the Bais Hamikdash. Right, it should come straight from the Mishkan, right? Okay, whatever it is, fine. So Zok the Gemara. My Tana the Getani va'oid. Right, what does it mean that he says va'oid? Usually va'oid is a continuation. Ilai mishum the Tana lechad lechumra v'Getani achriti mishum the Getani lechad lechumra v'Getani achriti. Right, mishum hachi Getani va'oid. That's what it said va'oid, meaning Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava left off the previous Mishnah by saying that the only thing that these pasken work, that these boards work for, is for a be'er of the rabbin, right? He needed two things. It needed to be fresh water, and it needed to be from the public. So now he's saying another chumrah here, that the karfef has to have either a hut in it, or a house in it, or has to be close to the city. So since it's two chumras, that's why it says ve'oid, right? Rabbi Yehuda the Tanale Rabbi Yehuda, right, a couple of blot ago, also said a chumrah, and then he said something else, another chumrah, and there it didn't say the word va'id. So Hasam Asakura Rabbanon, there the reason why it didn't say va'id is because the Rabbanon's shita was said. First it was Rabbi Yehuda, said a chumrah, then it was the Rabbanon, and then it went back to Rabbi Yehuda, so therefore we're not going to say va'id. Here, the last Mishnah ended off Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, and then the next Mishnah started it, so therefore it said va'id. Right? Now you can ask, why did the Mishnah set it up that way? Why didn't he just flip the shitas, then you don't have to say the word va'id? Okay. And whatever the Rabbanon make a break in between, it doesn't say va'id. For R Eliezer, the Sukkah daf Sekur Rabbanon v'Katani va'id. R Eliezer in Sukkah, right, which is talking about in Sukkah, it's almost 30 days before Sukkot, yeah, that you have supposed to have 14 sudas, and if you didn't, then you're supposed to make sure you have 14 sudas on Sukkot, 2 a day. And Rabbi Yehuda and the Chum say no, there's no set amount, only on the first day, and that's it. And then Rabbi Eliezer said, if you don't eat on, did I say Rabbi Yehuda? I meant Rabbi Eliezer, right? And Rabbi Eliezer says that if you didn't eat on the first day Yom Tiv, so then you can complete it. You could do like Tashlum and make it up on the last day. Whatever it is, that's what it says over there in Sukkah. That's what Rashi says. So and there, it does say va'oid, even though the Rabbanon's opinion is in between Rabbi Eliezer opinions. So Hasab Milsehu de Sukkah. There, the hefsek, meaning the Rabbanon, are referring to, it's talking about the same achlok. But here, there was something else totally that separated it. So therefore, we're not going to say va'oid. Okay. Fine. Rabbi Akiva says that even if you don't have any of the above options, you're allowed to go into you're allowed to carry in the karfef, right? So Rabbi Akiva Hainu Tanakama. Rabbi Akiva is the same thing as the Tanakama, right? Back on Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, the Tanakama says the same thing, that you don't need anybody to live in the karfef. So you can be now davar muad. The difference between them is a slight amount. The Tanya R Yehuda davar muad yesh al shivim avishraim v'loy nidnu chachamim b'shir. There's a slight amount more than 70 Amos and change, right? V'loy nidnu chachamim b'shir, and the chachamim did not say how much it was. V'kama shir Sasaim k'chatzar mishkan, and how much is the shir of Sasaim? It's the chatzar mishkan. So basically, there's this tiny little measurement that they're having a disagreement about, which the chachamim didn't even explain exactly how much it is. Well, actually, the kama shir Sasaim should be later. Anyways, the difference between them is this slight amount. Yeah. Meaning the Bais Sasaim is slightly more than Shivim Amma V'Shirayim and Shivim Amma V'Shirayim. That's basically what comes out. Meaning a Bais Sasaim, let's say you have it 100 by 50. If you chop that up and you put it around the 50, you're going to have a slight discrepancy. So the one that says in our Mishna, Reb Akiva says Shivim Amma V'Shirayim, Shivim Amma V'Shirayim. So that's what he's talking about. He's talking about 70 and change 70. And when it says Bais Sasaim, it's slightly more. Okay. But kama shir Sasaim k'chatzar mishkan. Where are you getting the shir of Sasaim? That's like the chatzar mishkan. How do you know? Amr Yehuda damakra arich chatzar meya ba'ama v'roichav chamishim b'chamishim. The length of the chatzar was 100 amas, and the width was 50 with 50. Right? So Amr Torah tol chamishim v'siviv chamishim. When it says the lashon of, what is the lashon of 50-50? 50 with 50. So what we're saying is that what you do is you take the extra, right? If you have something that's 100 by 50, so then that's basically 2 squares of 50 right next to each other. So what you want to do is you take 1 square of 50 and you chop it up and you put it around the 50 by 50, and that will get you 70 and change. Pashtei the krab maiksiv. Very interesting question here. That's the way we dash in the pasuk. What's the pashup shan in the pasuk? How come the Gemara is asking that here? Right? The Gemara doesn't usually ask, what's the pashup shan in the pasuk? Right? The Gemara constantly makes drushes and drushes of stuff that you would never think is the pshat. And all of a sudden here, right? The Gemara wants to know what's the pashup shan in the pasuk. Yeah? So Pashte, what are you saying?
No, that was a mega joke. So
yeah. So Pashte, the krab, and maiksiv, what is the pashte of the pasuk talking about? Amar Abaya, Hemen mishkan asfas chamishim. Put the mishkan, meaning the actual mishkan. This is talking about the yard around the mishkan, right? The mishkan wasn't 100 amos by 50, right? It was, remember, does anybody remember the measurement of the mishkan way back when? 30.
10 by 30?
10 by 30. Very good, right?
So are we going to be learning a kula and Hilchas Shabbos from this?
What would be the kula and Hilchas Shabbos?
I know, that's what I'm thinking. Maybe that's what they're asking. What the pshat is, what the pashup shot is.
Is it a kula? It's just a measurement. I don't know. Is it more makel?
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I hear.
Saying once they started talking about the mishkan.
Wait, we wanted to know the pashup shot?
Yeah, meaning like an agav. Like once we said the mishkan, instead of talking about it from a perspective, what is it? Just give me some more information about the mishkan itself.
Right. I hear.
And that's what Rashi. Maybe. I mean, it's Meduya from Rashi that saying specifically
that's
in the Mishnah, in the Mishkan.
Le'inyan Mishkan, Pashke the cause Le'inyan. I mean, for the Mishkan itself, what is it talking about? Yeah. Okay, I hear.
Understand the Mishkan.
So anyway, so Amar Abaya, Hemed Mishkan Asfas Chamishim, put the actual Mishkan on the edge of the 50, Kadeshi Chamishim Amma Lefanov, so you should have 50 Amas in front of you, Ve'esrim Amma L'chol Ruach V'Ruach, and then 20 Amas to each direction, right? Because if the Mishkan takes up 30, right, meaning the whole thing is 100 long. You want to move the Mishkan to the edge of 50, so you have this big yard of 50 in front of you, right? Then the Mishkan itself takes up 30, and then you have 20, then you'll have 20 and behind it. Okay, then why should you do it that way? I'm not sure why. Why should you? So what's the big mile of having it like that? So that it should have a yard? Okay, I'm not sure. I don't know why. Why should you have it specifically like that? Maybe that's where the Bais Hamikdash comes from. They have all the yard in front of that, right?
Mr. Chamishim is the spitz, no?
You say, okay, I hear, but that's probably why, right? Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't sure. Okay, let's see weiter. Right? So if it's longer, then it's no good. If it's got to be a perfect square. But we have a brisa that it says that if it's longer, more than double, longer, right? So we're saying that it should be 100 by 50, right? So if it's even any longer than that, then it's no good. Again, it's more than double, right? You have two squares of 50, right? But what happens if you made it 101 by 50, or 101 by 49? Then it's no good. But that doesn't have to be square. You mamash have a straight up stira between the R Eliezers. One he says it has to be a square, and one he says it can't be longer than can't be bigger than twice the length. So our Mishna is referring to, it's not referring that it should be square. It should be perfectly long, the double the length of the width, but that's it, no more than that. That's the case. That's Rabbi Yosi. Right? Rabbi Yosi already said that. So the difference between them is the squaring of the squaring what the Rabbanan are saying. Meaning, Rashi says the pshat is here. Is it, meaning according to both of them, it could be longer than thin. That's fine. 100 by 50 is fine. It doesn't have to be square. But Rabbi Yosi holds that the lichatchilas that it should be square will allow it to be less than square, to more than square. But it's not preferred. And Rabbi Eliezer will say no, it's fine to have it which either way you want, square or long. Fine. Rabbi Yosi Aimer, right? V'chulu. So Itmar Amar Rabbi Yosi, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Halacha Rabbi Yosi. The halacha is like Rabbi Yosi, right? That a karfef can be longer, twice as long as the width. Rabbi Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Halacha Rabbi Akiva. The halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. Right, which is what that you don't need anything in the yard. As long as you have it, you can have a big empty yard. As long as it has a fence, you're fine. But Tarvayu Lakula, and they're both Lakula. Right, Shmuel is obviously saying that he's pasken like both of them Lakula. Fine, but Tzricha, and then he needs to say he needs both. If you just say the Allah like Rabbi Yosi, you would think they're good. You have it longer. It can be longer than it is wide, but you need to have a shamira based tiro kamash malana Allah Rabbi Akiva. So it teaches Allah like Rabbi Akiva. Yeshmin Allah Rabbi Akiva have a mina da'arach v'katan loy. I would think that according to Rabbi Akiva, you don't need anything in the yard, but it can't be any longer than wide. I mean, it has to be square. Kamash malana Allah Rabbi Yosi. So it teaches us that Allah is like Rabbi Yosi, that you're still going to need what's called now. I'm sorry, that it could be longer than it is thin. Fine. Now a new thing. Karfef shu yosi me Bais Sasaim shehukav l'dira. Let's say you have a karfef that's more than Bais Sasaim, that is it's surrounded for dira, meaning for people to use, right? And then nizra rubai, and then what happened is that you planted vegetables in most of it, right? So let's assume that you had a karfef that it was 100 by 50, and then you went and you planted in 50% of it. You planted vegetables. That harehu kigina, then it becomes into a garden for usher, and it's usher to carry there. Why? Because you can't, using vegetables is not livable. Vegetables, you have a cornfield. A cornfield, you're not going to call that hukav ladira because it can't exactly hang out now. But if you make, those people that make the mazes in the cornfield, then that would be considered hukav ladira. But that's all we're talking about here. Again, you have this big karfef, right? It's Bais Sasaim, 100 by 50.
And make maize and maize is what you're saying?
Yeah, right, exactly, right. Yeah. So anyway, so again, the case is that you have a karfef, it's 100 by 50, and then in 51% of it, you planted vegetables. So then that will knock it down and will make it usher again, because most of it is planted with vegetables and it's not livable, right? Not the rubai, but if you plant now, planting means trees. Then it's like a chotzer or mutter, because trees, you can walk around trees, right? That's yes, so that's the case. Again, there's a difference between planting vegetables and trees. Binyamin, that's why I guess you decided to have that as your background tonight with the okay, very good. Yeah. So Nizu Rubai.
Exactly.
There you go. Okay, so Nizu Rubai. So if you planted most of it, Amar Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua Layamaron, when do we say that it's going to ruin the karfef? Ela yosi and Bais Sasaim. That's only if it's more than 2 sa. Right? So therefore it's going to be asa. Yeah, and then meaning it's more than 2 sa of livable place, and then next to it is the vegetables. That's going to kill the whole thing. Bais Sasaim mutter, but if it's only Bais Sasaim, but if the planted area is only Bais Sasaim, then it's going to be mutter. Right? Then it's going to be matter the whole karfef. Kiman, who's that like? Reb Shimon. That's like Reb Shimon. The Tana and Reb Shimon Omer echad gagos, vechad chatzeres, vechad karfefas, v'shus achas lekelim shashavse b'soichan, v'loy lekelim shashavse b'soichan bayis. This getting back to what we said in the Mishna, at the end of the Mishnah, that if you didn't make an eruv, right, so then you can't carry anything. But Reb Shimon says that let's say you left your tool in the yard, and you forgot, you totally forgot to make the eruv with the matzahs, but you left some tools in the yard, or you had a chair in the yard. So whatever's left in the yard can be carried from the roof to the chutzner to the karfef, whatever it is. It could be carried from one place to the next, even without. Again, it has to have mechitzas, but even if you didn't do eruv chatzeres. But again, only things that were in the yard from before Shabbos, not kalim. Yeah. So therefore, we're thinking that it must be Reb Shimon who holds that a karfef can combine with other areas. So then the Gemara says, Reb Shimon nami, but according to Reb Shimon too, even the nizar rubai, but even Reb Shimon would hold it, since most of the yard gets planted with vegetables, have a humauta, that miut of the yard is batalei lagabi ruba, it's batal to the roiv, v'havalei karfef yosi misasayim v'asa, and then it becomes a karfef that's bigger than 2 sa, and it's also right. A karfef, it's not meant to be lived in. If it's bigger than 2 sa, is a problem. This is what he must have said. Hamiyuta shari, right? If it's only a miyut, right? Meaning if you planted 49% of the karfef with vegetables, then it would be mutter. Amar Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua Layamar and El Havi Bais Sasaim. That's only if it wasn't Bais Sasaim. Avo Bais Sasaim also. Now it's going the other way. He's saying a chumrah. But if it was Bais Sasaim worth, then it's going to be Asr. Why? Keman Kirabanon. Who's that like? That's like the Rabbanon who hold that you're not allowed to carry from one karfef to another chutzner if you left things in there. Rav Yehuda says he learns this whole thing lakula. Hamiyuta shari. It's mashma that if it's a mir, it's mutter. Amar Rav Huna Breder Yeshua Lo Amar Ela Bais Sasaim. That's only talking about Bais Sasaim. Aval yosi Bais Sasaim asur. But if it's more than Bais Sasaim, it's going to be asur. Keman Reb Shimon. Then it's like Reb Shimon who would allow you to carry from one karfef to a gina and back and forth. Okay, fine. We got it done pretty quick tonight. Yeah, fine. Alrighty.
Where exactly are we on the daf? I was paying attention to the phone, not the Gemara.
Sorry, 2 dots on. We're like not a 2 dots.
No,
I want
Yeah,
to
we made it to the 2 dots.
2 dots
Oh,
around
that's
6, 7 lines down. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.
All right. Lala tov.
I sign you out.
You know.
Night, Yashikaya.
Good night.
Have a good night.